The person sleeping in class is not always the lazy one. That's what most people believe. If someone is always dozing off, barely paying attention, they must be careless, distracted, or just not smart enough. Because in most classrooms, effort is visible. The one taking notes, asking questions, staying focused. That's the one we assume will succeed. And the one with their head down, they're already falling behind. But then something breaks that belief. The results come out, and the same person who looked the least engaged scores the highest. Not once, not twice, but consistently. So now the question changes. Why are they sleeping? What are they doing that everyone else is missing? Because the truth is, they're not winning by accident. And it's not luck. It's a different way of processing the world. Most people think learning happens in the classroom, but that's only half the story. Sometimes, the real learning happens somewhere no one sees. The first thing most people don't understand is this. Not all attention is equal. Just because someone is looking at the teacher doesn't mean they're absorbing anything. And just because someone's eyes are closed doesn't mean their mind is off. Some people don't need constant input. They don't rely on repetition in the moment. They process information differently. They listen once, but they listen deeply. They don't try to catch everything. They focus on patterns, key ideas, structures. While others are writing every word, they're filtering, reducing noise, keeping only what matters. And once they get it, they don't need to stay fully alert anymore, because for them, understanding is faster than memorizing. This connects to something deeper in psychology. It's called cognitive efficiency. Some people use less mental energy to understand the same information, not because they're better, but because they process smarter. Imagine two students. One repeats everything 10 times, trying to remember. The other understands it once and connects it to something they already know. Who do you think retains it longer? There's a difference. And that difference is actually at the center of something that psychology has been quietly studying for decades. The way some minds work doesn't look like learning from the outside, but something is happening, something very deliberate. There's a concept researchers call selective attention. Most of us are taught, without being taught, that learning looks a certain way. Upright, alert, eyes forward, pen moving. We perform engagement, and in doing that, we spread our attention thin. We're half listening, half writing, half worried about whether we look like we're paying attention. But some people, they don't perform. They wait. They let most of the information pass through without grabbing at it. And then something lands. One idea, one explanation, one moment of clarity, and they hold on to that. Just that. Researchers at Princeton found something interesting in how students process information differently. Some learners, they called them deep processors, encode information at a structural level. They're not memorizing the surface. They're understanding the why beneath it. And when exam day comes, they're not recalling a list of facts. They're reconstructing logic they already internalized. That's a completely different process, and it doesn't require the same kind of visible effort. The brain that understood something deeply doesn't need to rehearse it the same way. It already knows where it's stored. This type of person, they often have a particular relationship with boredom. They're not afraid of it. They don't try to escape it. In fact, stillness is kind of their natural state, where most of us fill silence with noise. With reviewing, rereading, rechecking, they sit in the quiet, and in that quiet, something organizes itself. Psychologists call this diffuse thinking. It's the mode your brain enters when you're not actively forcing it to work. When you're in the shower, half asleep, staring out a window. And it turns out, that's often when your deepest understanding solidifies. The focus mode is great for absorbing new information, but the diffuse mode, the one that looks like nothing from the outside, that's where connections form. That's where understanding becomes yours. The sleeper in the back of the class might have been in that mode more than anyone realized. Not checked out, checked in, just differently. Think about your own best moments of understanding. Not the ones at a desk, mid-highlight, surrounded by notes, but the ones that came after. The morning before the exam, when something just clicked. The moment in the shower when a concept suddenly made sense. The half-asleep realization that untangled something you've been forcing for hours. Where were you? Probably not performing learning. Probably quiet. And now think about how you judge yourself when you're not visibly working. The guilt of rest. The anxiety of stillness. As if learning that doesn't look like effort somehow doesn't count. But what if it does? What if some of your best thinking happens in exactly the moments you're trying to escape? The person who slept in class and scored high. They weren't cheating the system. They had just stopped performing for it. And in doing so, they accidentally gave their mind something rare. Permission to process things on its own terms. That's not laziness. That's a kind of trust. Trust in their own understanding. Trust that they don't need to be visibly grinding for the work to be real. Most of us spend so much energy looking like we're learning that we forget to actually learn. We mistake busyness for depth. We mistake visible effort for real understanding. And the student in the back of the room, head down, breathing slow. They had quietly figured out something. Most people spend years trying to understand that the mind works best when you stop micromanaging it. There's a certain kind of intelligence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its hand. It doesn't take careful color-coded notes. It doesn't perform. It just absorbs, processes, appears when needed. And we often mistake that quietness for absence. We assume that what we can't see isn't happening. But some of the most important things happening inside a person are completely invisible from the outside. The sleeping student taught us something without meaning to, without knowing it. That understanding is not always loud. That depth doesn't always look like effort. And that sometimes the ones who seem the least concerned are the ones who are the most prepared, not because they didn't care, but because they cared in a different direction. Inward, quiet, patient. If any part of this felt familiar, if you recognize someone in this, or maybe recognized yourself, that recognition means something. It's worth sitting with. If this made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it.